Lazarus was not just a name whispered through the corridors of faith. He was a man who lived, laughed, and loved in the gentle folds of Bethany's hills, a village where olive trees bowed to the wind, and every sunset seemed to linger longer than it should, as if time itself enjoyed resting there. He was the brother of Martha and Mary, two women of deep devotion, each carrying faith in her own way. Martha, steady and strong, found her worship and service in the bread she kneaded and the table she set. Mary, quieter but burning with inner light, found hers in stillness and listening. Between them lived Lazarus, a man who often smiled more than he spoke, whose silence seemed to understand what others tried to say. Bethany was a small place, simple yet sacred. It stood just outside Jerusalem, a day's walk away, yet it felt like another world entirely. The air was different there, softer, perhaps because the hearts that dwelled within it were open, ready. It was no coincidence that Jesus often found rest in this humble home. When the noise of the crowds pressed too hard upon him, when the questions of the learned and the doubts of the proud grew heavy, he came to Bethany, to them in that home. Jesus was not the teacher of multitudes, nor the performer of miracles. He was a friend. He would sit at their table, laughing quietly at Martha's insistence that he eat more, listening to Mary's soft questions about heaven and the soul, and smiling at Lazarus, who needed no words to express his gratitude for these moments of peace. Their friendship was not built on grandeur, but on shared silences, knowing looks, and the sacred ordinary of daily life. There was something about Lazarus that drew people in. He didn't command attention. He welcomed it gently, like sunlight entering through a doorway. He was a listener, not out of shyness, but out of care. People in Bethany often said that when you spoke to Lazarus, it felt as though he truly heard you, not just your words, but the ache behind them. His faith wasn't the loud kind. It wasn't carved into speeches or painted onto walls. It lived quietly, in the way he greeted strangers, in the way he lifted the burdens of his neighbors without making it a display. He didn't preach. He embodied peace, and perhaps that was why his home became a kind of sanctuary. Travelers stopped there to rest. Friends gathered there to share stories. And even the Master himself found comfort under that roof. When Jesus came to Bethany, the air seemed to change. Children would run down the dusty roads whispering, "He's here. The teacher is here." The villagers would emerge from their homes, not to demand signs, but to feel the calm that followed him. In those moments, the hills of Bethany seemed to hum with unseen harmony, a rhythm between heaven and earth. To Lazarus, these visits were a mystery he could never quite unravel. Jesus carried a presence unlike anyone he'd ever known, gentle yet immense, as though eternity itself had learned to walk among mortals. When he spoke, Lazarus felt his heart respond, like a string drawn by a familiar note. The words of the Master did not just reach the ear, they awakened something within. There were nights when the house fell silent. The lamps burned low, and the stars outside shimmered like ancient witnesses. Lazarus would sit near the doorway, watching the soft glow of the moon rest upon the olive trees, and he would think about the things Jesus said about faith that could move mountains, about the life beyond life, and about the Father whose love knows no boundaries. It was in those quiet nights that Lazarus began to feel a strange awareness, as though something vast and unseen was drawing near. Not fear, not even awe, just a deep knowing that his story, so ordinary and unremarkable, was part of something much greater. There are moments in every life that seem insignificant at first. A word spoken, a hand held, a breath drawn. Yet those moments often carry the threads that weave destiny together. Lazarus could not have known that his friendship with the Nazarene would one day shake the foundations of belief itself. The days in Bethany went on peacefully. The sisters managed the household, Jesus came and went, and Lazarus tended to the olive groves and the vineyards that sustained them. Yet beneath the calm of their days, something eternal was stirring unseen. But present, those who visited often said that the house of Lazarus felt different, as though a kind of light lingered there, invisible yet tangible. It wasn't the brightness of candles or the warmth of fire. It was a peace that wrapped itself around you, as if the air remembered every prayer ever whispered within those walls. In those times, death was not an abstract idea. People saw it often in the fields, in the towns, in the faces of loved ones taken too soon. Yet for Lazarus, death had always felt distant, like a far-off horizon he would one day reach, but never soon. He was strong, young, and full of quiet purpose, but destiny has a way of arriving unannounced. It begins with a whisper of fatigue you cannot shake, a shadow that lengthens without you noticing. And so it came to Lazarus, as softly as dusk descends upon a field. At first, no one worried. Perhaps it was the heat or the exhaustion of work. Martha prepared herbs, and Mary prayed. But the illness did not fade. The strength that once filled his frame began to wane, his color paled, and his once steady breath grew shallow. The laughter that used to echo from their table gave way to whispers. The songs that Mary sang in the evenings became prayers. They sent for Jesus. The message was simple but full of emotion. Lord, the one you love is sick. It was not a plea of despair, it was a statement of faith. They knew he would come. How could he not? He loved Lazarus like a brother, but days passed. The roads remained empty. The door stayed unknocked, and as time stretched like a cruel shadow, hope began to tremble. Martha tried to remain composed, focusing on care and comfort. Mary stayed by her brother's side, whispering words he could barely hear. Lazarus, weak but aware, looked at his sisters and tried to smile. His eyes even then carried peace. In the silence between breaths, he seemed to be listening to something unseen, a call that was not yet fully spoken, but near. Outside, the olive trees swayed as if in mourning, and the hills of Bethany waited. Still and silent. No one could have known that this house, this small, humble home, would soon become the stage of one of the greatest revelations the world would ever witness, that in this quiet village, life and death themselves would meet face to face. For now, all that could be heard was the sound of Martha's hurried footsteps, Mary's soft weeping, and the gentle, fading breath of a man whose story was about to transcend time. The echo between life and death had begun, and it started not with thunder, but with a whisper. Asterisk, asterisk. The days in Bethany grew heavy with sorrow. The air that once carried laughter and the scent of fresh bread now hung thick with grief. Inside the home of Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, time itself seemed to stop, as though the world outside dared not move while their hearts were breaking. Lazarus lay still. The illness that crept upon him had taken its course, and now the man whose presence once filled the house with quiet peace had fallen silent. Martha stood near the doorway, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breath. Her faith was strong, the kind built through years of duty and devotion, but in that moment, it trembled under the weight of unanswered prayer. Mary sat at her brother's side, her eyes red, her face pale from sleepless nights. She had spent hours whispering words to heaven, hoping for a miracle, praying for the sound of footsteps on the road, the sign that Jesus had come. But the door remained unopened, and the only sound that answered her prayers was the faint wind brushing through the olive trees outside. "Lord, if you had been here," the words formed in her heart long before they ever left her lips. There are moments when faith feels like a candle flickering in the storm, fragile, but still burning. For Mary and Martha, that candle was their only light now. Neighbors came to comfort them. Women from the village brought food, sat beside them, and wept in silence. Men stood outside, speaking in low voices about the sickness, about how it had come so suddenly. Others asked the question no one dared say aloud: where was Jesus? He had healed strangers, restored sight to the blind, and made the lame walk. Surely he could have saved his friend, but still he did not come. The body of Lazarus was wrapped in linen cloths, according to custom. The sisters followed as neighbors carried him to the tomb, a small cave carved into the rock at the edge of the village. Martha walked with her head bowed, her lips moving in prayer. Mary could not speak. Her tears fell silently onto the path. When they reached the tomb, a heavy stone was rolled before the entrance. The sound of it grinding against the rock echoed through the valley, a sound that felt final, UNCHANGEABLE. And just like that, the world seemed divided. On one side, the living. On the other, the silence of death. That night, Bethany was wrapped in stillness. Inside their home, the sisters sat together but said little. The oil lamps burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. Each corner of the house seemed to whisper memories, the laughter at supper, the shared prayers, and the sound of Lazarus' steps on the floor. Grief has a way of stretching time. Every hour feels like a day, every breath a struggle. For Martha, the pain became a question she couldn't silence. She knew who Jesus was, the Son of God, the one who spoke life into the lifeless, but why had he waited? Mary's grief was different. Where Martha reasoned, Mary simply felt. Her faith was sweet, but deep, the kind that held both trust and sorrow in the same hand. She did not understand, but she did not turn away. Days passed. The mourners came and went. Some brought words of comfort, others only silence. The sisters received them all, though their hearts were elsewhere, fixed on a road that remained empty. Until one morning, as the sun rose over the hills, a whisper moved through the village. The Master is coming. The words spread quickly, from house to house, like the first light of dawn breaking through the night. Martha was the first to hear it. She didn't wait. She stood up, wiped her tears, and went out to meet him. Her steps were swift, her heart torn between pain and hope. When she saw Jesus on the road, her voice broke before she could stop it. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." It was not accusation, it was longing, a cry born of both faith and heartbreak. Jesus looked at her with eyes that held eternity. within them eyes that saw not only her sorrow, but the story beyond it. Your brother will rise again, he said gently. Martha nodded through her tears. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus stepped closer, his voice steady and filled with unshakable truth. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. The words hung in the air, weightless yet powerful, as if creation itself paused to listen. Martha felt something stir inside her. The ache didn't vanish, but it was met with light. In her heart, she knew he had come not too late, but exactly when heaven willed. She turned and hurried back to call her sister. The Master is here, she said softly, and he's asking for you. Mary rose at once. She didn't stop to think or wipe her tears. She simply went. Those who had gathered to mourn followed her, thinking she was going to the tomb. But her steps led to Jesus. When she reached him, she fell to her knees, her voice trembling with the same words her sister had spoken. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And she wept. The crowd that followed her wept too. And in that moment, the Son of God, the one who commanded the seas and the stars, wept with them. He did not weep for the loss, for he knew what was about to unfold. He wept because he felt their pain, the ache of mortality, the wound of separation, and the fragile sorrow of being human. Those tears were not weakness. They were compassion in its purest form. In them, heaven and earth met divinity understanding humanity. Where have you laid him? Jesus asked. Lord, come and see, they replied. The crowd followed as he walked to the tomb. The path was lined with mourners and olive trees, the air thick with grief and expectation. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers toward the cave. The tomb stood there silent, cold, sealed by stone. When Jesus saw it, he raised his eyes to heaven. The stillness around him deepened. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then, with a voice that carried through the valley, he spoke, "Take away the stone." Martha hesitated. "Lord," she said softly, "by now there will be a stench." It's been 4 days. 4 days, the number that marked finality, the moment when even hope seemed to have decayed. But Jesus turned to her with a gaze that pierced through all doubt. "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And so, with trembling hands, the men began to roll away the stone. The sound echoed across the hillside, stone against stone, finality giving way to faith. The darkness of the tomb opened before them. The air grew still. Jesus lifted his eyes once more and prayed aloud, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I say this for the sake of those standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then he looked into the blackness of the tomb, the place where death thought it had claimed victory, and his voice rang out, clear as thunder over the valley, "Lazarus, come out." The words echoed like a command to creation itself. The crowd held its breath, and then movement. From within the darkness, a sound faint at first, then unmistakable, the rustle of linen, the shifting of stone. Every eye turned, and from the shadowed mouth of the tomb, a figure appeared bound in grave clothes, face wrapped in cloth yet standing. Breathing. It was Lazarus. Martha gasped. Mary covered her mouth, tears streaming anew, but now they were tears of awe, of disbelief made real. Jesus said calmly, "Unbind him and let him go." And as they removed the wrappings from his body, the truth unfolded before them. The warmth had returned to his skin, his eyes were olive, and his heart was beating strong. A man once dead now stood among the living, and the boundary between life and death was shattered in that moment. Bethany was no longer just a village. It was the meeting place of heaven and earth, of mortality and eternity. The silence of the tomb had given way to the voice of resurrection. The silence that followed the miracle was unlike any other. For a moment, no one moved. The wind stilled. The world itself seemed to hesitate, as if creation was in awe of what it had just witnessed. Then came the sound gasps, cries, whispers trembling with disbelief. People clutched one another, some stepping back in fear, others falling to their knees in reverence. A few wept openly, their tears not of mourning but of astonishment. And there, at the mouth of the tomb, stood Lazarus, once shrouded in the stillness of death, now wrapped in the light of the living. The bandages clung to him, evidence of where he had been, but his eyes were alive, clear, deep, and filled with something beyond comprehension, as though they had seen through the veil and returned with knowledge that words could never carry. When Martha and Mary reached him, they didn't speak. They simply embraced him, trembling with joy and disbelief. Lazarus's hands, once cold and motionless, now clung to his sister's with warmth. For a moment, time itself seemed to stand still, a family reunited not by chance, but by the power of eternity. The crowd pressed closer, unsure whether to cheer or kneel. Some covered their faces, others whispered prayers. No one had ever seen such a thing, not a rumor, not a vision, but life itself restored before their eyes. Is it truly him? Someone whispered. "It is Lazarus," another replied, voice breaking with awe. "The man who was dead now walks among us." Jesus stood quietly nearby, watching. His expression was calm, not triumphant, but tender, as though he were looking at a secret long kept by heaven and finally revealed. He had not done this to prove power. He had done it to reveal truth, that life itself answers to the voice of its creator, and that love does not end at the grave dot. As the sun began to lower behind the hills, the valley of Bethany filled with voices. Some rejoiced, shouting praises to God. Others ran toward Jerusalem to spread the news. He called the dead man out. "Lazarus lives." The echo of that cry carried through the city gates and into the courts of the temple. It stirred the hearts of many, but it also ignited fear in others. For while the people celebrated, the leaders of Jerusalem trembled. If this Jesus could command death to release its hold, what power on earth could contain him? In the days that followed, Bethany became a place of pilgrimage. Travelers arrived from near and far, each one drawn by the story that seemed too impossible to believe until they saw it for themselves. They came to see Lazarus, the man who had crossed the border between worlds. At first, he could hardly speak. The experience was too vast, too sacred. When people asked him what he saw beyond the veil, he would pause, his gaze drifting to the horizon, and answer softly, "There are things beyond words. But I tell you this, there is no darkness where his voice can't reach." His words carried a peace that quieted every question. Children followed him through the streets, pointing with wide eyes. Old men touched his robe, as if to assure themselves he was real. Mothers whispered prayers of hope for their own sons and daughters. But not all hearts rejoiced. In the city, whispers turned to plots. The miracle of Lazarus had spread like fire through dry fields, igniting belief everywhere it went. Crowds began to follow Jesus in even greater numbers, drawn not just by his teachings but by this undeniable sign: a man once dead, now alive. The Pharisees gathered in secret, their voices low but urgent. "If we let him go on like this," one said, "everyone will believe in him, and then we will lose everything." Another spoke more darkly, "This Lazarus is proof. As long as he lives, people will not stop speaking his name." And so, in the shadows of fear, a plan was born not only against Jesus, but against Lazarus too. They decided he must be silenced. Yet Lazarus, unaware of the plots forming in Jerusalem, continued to live simply. He returned to his home, his sisters, his village, and to the rhythm of ordinary life. Though nothing about his days was ordinary anymore, there was a stillness about him, not of fear, but of profound understanding. Those who looked into his eyes felt something they could not describe, as though he carried eternity within him. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, Lazarus would walk beyond the village to the hills. The stars stretched across the sky, bright and uncountable, like promises. He would sit among the olive trees and listen to the wind, remembering the stillness of the tomb and the voice that called him forth. He did not speak much about that moment, but those who knew him said he often closed his eyes and smiled, spoke of peace, of gratitude, of the unshakable truth that death no longer held dominion. The people of Bethany never tired of telling his story. They spoke of how the Master's voice had pierced the silence of the grave, how Lazarus emerged bound yet breathing, and how their tears of despair turned into songs of praise. Each retelling became more than memory. It became faith, but faith has always been a light that casts shadows. Not all were drawn to it. Some recoiled from it, afraid of what it meant. If Jesus truly had power over life and death, then no human authority could rival him. And for those who sought control, that truth was unbearable. In Jerusalem, the leaders' unease grew into obsession. They sent spies to Bethany, men who stood in the crowd pretending to listen to Jesus' teachings, but whose eyes were fixed on Lazarus. They reported back every detail: how the people gathered, how they spoke his name, and how his presence seemed to confirm everything Jesus proclaimed. And so, the man who had once been mourned by his village became the target of those who feared his life more than his death. Still, Lazarus did not hide. He walked through the marketplace, greeted travelers, and prayed openly in the temple when he visited Jerusalem. Fear did not touch him, for what could threaten a man who had already known the stillness of death and the sound of life calling him back? The villagers said that even the air seemed different when Lazarus passed by. Birds quieted, children smiled, and even those burdened by sorrow found comfort near him. He never sought fame. He never tried to explain. He simply lived, each breath a testimony, each step a declaration that love and life are stronger than the grave. Mary and Martha watched their brother with reverence. They saw how his presence, once familiar, now carried a quiet holiness. He no longer hurried through the tasks of the day. He moved with purpose, savoring every moment as if it were a gift. Sometimes Mary would ask softly, "Brother, were you afraid?" Lazarus would smile, that same calm, knowing smile. "Only for a moment," he would say. "But then I heard his voice, and there was no fear in it, only love." The people who listened would fall silent, their hearts stirring, for in that simple statement lay a truth too deep for theology, that the essence of life is not to escape death, but to be called beyond it by love itself. Word of the miracle continued to spread from Judea to Galilee, from cities to distant villages. Everywhere it went, it carried the same echo. He called Lazarus from the tomb, and in every retelling, faith was reborn. In the hearts of the weary, courage awakened. In the minds of the doubting, questions turned to wonder. But for Jesus, the raising of Lazarus marked more than a miracle. It was a turning point. He knew the cost of what he had done. By calling his friend out of the grave, he had sealed his own path to the cross. The echo that began in the tomb of Lazarus would soon reach Golgotha. Yet even then, he did not turn away, because love, once set in motion, does not retreat from its purpose. And Lazarus, unaware of the storm that was gathering, continued to walk among the living, the man who had once walked among the dead. He had become more than a story. He was the echo itself, a living reminder that there exists a voice no tomb can silence, a love no death can defeat. The raising of Lazarus did not remain a secret for long. Within days, the news had swept through Judea like fire in dry grass. Merchants carried the story to the city gates. Pilgrims repeated it in the temple courtyards, and children whispered it in wonder beneath fig trees. Each retelling grew richer in awe. He called him by name, and the dead obeyed. But in the stone chambers of Jerusalem, where power clung tightly to its throne, that same story became a threat. The miracle that had brought faith to the hearts of many brought fear to the hearts of the few who ruled them. In the temple courts, the elders and scribes gathered. Their faces were stern, their voices hushed. "What are we to do?" one demanded. "This man works signs that cannot be denied. The people follow him in droves." Another replied, "If we do nothing, all will believe in him. Then Rome will come and take our place, our nation, everything." Beneath their words lay something deeper than politics. Fear of losing control, fear of a truth that no decree or argument could contain. For if Jesus truly commanded the grave, then no earthly authority could claim supremacy. The high priest rose, his voice cold and measured. "It is better that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." And thus in that dimly lit chamber a seed of death was sown, a decision cloaked in reasoning, yet born of envy and fear. The miracle that gave life to one man became the shadow that would follow another to his death. Meanwhile, in Bethany, life continued, or seemed to. The olive trees swayed gently on the hillside. The marketplace buzzed with daily chatter. Children played near the wells. Yet beneath that surface calm, something had changed. Bethany was no longer just a village. It had become a threshold, a place between wonder and danger, between revelation and persecution. Visitors came daily to see Lazarus. They arrived from every corner of the land, merchants from Jericho, fishermen from Galilee, scholars from Jerusalem. Some brought gifts of oil or bread, others came empty-handed but full of questions. They wanted to see the man who had stepped through death as through a doorway. Lazarus greeted them with patience, his manner gentle and unhurried. He no longer sought to explain what had happened. He had learned that some truths are not taught, only felt. When asked what he remembered, he would often look into the distance and answer simply, "I remember peace a peace without weight or end. And then I heard his voice. The words carried an authority no debate could touch. They spoke of an experience beyond reason, yet undeniably real, an echo that drew hearts closer to faith. But among the travelers were others, watchers. They stood at the edge of crowds, listening without asking, their eyes sharp and cautious. They took note of who came, who believed, and what was said. At night, they returned to the city to report every detail. The man lives, they told the council, and the people come by hundreds to see him. Many speak of Jesus as the Messiah. The story spreads faster than we can contain it. The high priest's reply was brief, chilling in its simplicity. Then we must end both stories at once. In the evenings, when the crowds thinned and silence returned to the hills, Lazarus would sit outside his home beside his sisters. The air carried the scent of myrrh and the hum of crickets. Sometimes, as they watched the last light fade, Martha would break the silence. "They will not forgive what happened," she said quietly. "You know that, don't you?" Lazarus nodded. "Yes, then why stay here? We could go north to Galilee, even beyond the Jordan. You would be safe." He turned to her, his expression calm. "Sister, I was once sealed in a tomb. I am not afraid of those who conceal another." Mary listened, her hands clasped around a clay lap. "You speak as though death were nothing." Lazarus smiled faintly. "Not nothing," he said, "but it is not the end. I have seen its face, and beyond it I saw him. Once you have heard his voice in the dark, no threat can silence you again." The sisters fell silent. There was nothing to add. The man who had walked out of death did not fear shadows. Word of the plot reached them quietly, whispered by a friend of a friend, someone who had overheard a conversation in Jerusalem. "They mean to kill you," the messenger said. "You and the teacher too." Martha's heart sank, but Lazarus only bowed his head. "Then it will be as it must." Still, there was sorrow in his eyes, not for himself, but for the one who had called him forth. He knew that the miracle that restored his breath had also drawn the noose tighter around the neck of his friend Dot at times. In the still hours before dawn, he would walk to the edge of the village where the tomb still stood. The stone that had sealed it lay rolled aside, untouched since the day of his resurrection. He would sit there in silence, the night wind moving through the grass. He remembered the darkness, the absolute stillness, the moment when his heart had stopped. He remembered the sound of his own name breaking through that stillness like light splitting the horizon. "Lazarus, come out." That voice still echoed within him. It had become part of his being, a pulse within his very breath. He realized then that resurrection was not simply about returning to life. It was about carrying eternity into time, becoming a living testimony that the eternal now dwelled among the mortal. And that was why they feared him Dot in the weeks that followed. Jesus returned to Bethany. It was near the time of the Passover, and the city was already swelling with pilgrims. The tension in the air was palpable, whispers of plots, the weight of expectation. Yet in Bethany, within the walls of that small home, there was a strange peace. They prepared a supper for him. Martha served as she always did, her movements careful, reverent. Mary, her heart overflowing, brought a jar of pure nard, an oil so costly that its fragrance alone was worth a year's wage. She broke it open and poured it over his feet, anointing him with tears and silence. The scent filled the room. mingling with the soft light of lamps. Some murmured at the extravagance, but Jesus looked at her with tenderness. "She has done this for my burial," he said softly. Lazarus watched him then, the man who had called him from the tomb now speaking of his own death. A quiet ache stirred within him. He understood, perhaps more than anyone in the room, that life and death were about to exchange places once more. He wanted to speak, to tell him that the voice that called the dead could never be silenced, but the words would not come. Instead, he simply met his gaze, and in that gaze was everything: gratitude, sorrow, and a love that did not need words. That night, as they ate together, laughter returned to the house for the first time since his illness. The weight of fear lifted, if only for a moment. Outside, the stars burned clear and cold. Inside, the warmth of light and friendship glowed. Yet even as they spoke, the wheels of betrayal turned in Jerusalem. The shadows lengthened, and the night before the Passover drew near. Lazarus could feel it, the coming darkness, the gathering storm. But he did not tremble. He knew now that death was not an ending, only a threshold. And beyond every threshold, there was always a voice that would call again. The days after that final supper in Bethany unfolded with a strange quietness, the kind that comes before a storm that no one dares name aloud. The streets of Jerusalem were crowded with pilgrims for the Passover, the air heavy with incense and the scent of lamb being roasted in every courtyard. Yet beneath the celebration lay a tension so sharp it could be felt in every glance. Rumors spread like cracks in dry earth. Some said Jesus was the promised one who would soon reveal his power before all Israel. Others whispered that the priests had already marked him for death. And somewhere between those rumors walked Lazarus, the living sign of everything both sides feared and hoped for. He could not walk through the market without feeling eyes upon him. Children would tug at their mother's garments, whispering, "That's him, the one who was dead." Some bowed as he passed. Others crossed themselves, afraid that one who had touched the grave carried its shadow with him. And among the crowds there were always a few who watched too closely men with the bearing of authority, who never smiled and never spoke. Lazarus had become both miracle and menace. Saint and scandal dot at night, he would sit with Mary and Martha, the oil lamps flickering against the walls, and the sisters would speak in hushed tones. "Word from Jerusalem," Martha said one evening, setting down her cup. "They're searching for him, for Jesus, and they speak your name too." Lazarus looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup absently. They think that by ending the sign, they can erase the truth. Mary's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "And what will you do, brother? If they come?" He looked at her with that same quiet steadiness he had carried since his return from the tomb. "If they come, they will find a man who owes his life to God. I will not run from that." There was silence. The wind moved softly outside, whispering through the olive branches. Martha's voice broke it, low and trembling. "Do you ever wonder why he called you back?" Lazarus paused before answering. "Every day." He leaned back, eyes lost somewhere beyond the flickering light. "When I heard his voice, that voice, it was not just calling me to breathe again. It was calling me to bear witness, to stand between life and death and show that neither belongs to us alone." Mary reached for his hand. "Then that is your cross." He nodded slowly. "And soon he will bear his." When the news came, it came like thunder. Jesus had been arrested, in the dark of night, betrayed by a kiss, taken from the garden where he prayed. The whispers came first, then the cries, then the disbelief. Bethany awoke to chaos at the sister's house filled with mourners and believers, voices overlapping in fear and anger. They've taken him to the priests. They mean to kill him. It was Judas, one of his own. Lazarus stood silent amid the storm of voices, his face pale but composed. He listened, every word piercing him like an arrow. Finally he spoke, not loud, but with a tone that silenced the room. "Then the time has come." Mary turned to him, eyes wide with desperation. "You can't just stand here. We must go, we must try to do what?" he asked gently. "To fight soldiers with words? To stop what must happen?" Her breath caught. "You speak as though you expected this." "I did," he said softly. "He told us, though none of us wanted to believe. The raising of the dead was never meant to end with me. It was meant to show what he would do and how he would conquer death itself." The words felt heavy in the air, too immense for anyone to answer. That night, Lazarus did not sleep. He walked through the village beneath the moonlight that painted the hills in silver. Each step echoed faintly against the stones, as though the earth itself remembered. He reached the edge of the road leading to Jerusalem and paused. The wind carried faint shouts from the distant city, the murmurs of crowds and the clash of anger and fear. He whispered to the wind, "Lord, you gave me back my life. I would give it again if it would lessen what awaits you." But the only answer was the cry of a night bird. Fading into the distance dotted dawn, the news reached Bethany. He had been condemned. The Roman governor had washed his hands. The priests had shouted for blood. And the people, those same people who once followed him in wonder, now demanded a cross. Martha fell to her knees, her hands pressed to her face. Mary wept without sound, her tears falling silently into the dust. Lazarus stood still, unable to speak. The weight of his own breath felt unbearable. The man who had called him from death was now being led to die. He walked alone to the tomb where he had once been buried. The morning light fell across the stone, the same stone that had once sealed him from the world. He touched it, feeling the roughness beneath his fingers. "You were open for me," he murmured, "but now they close his tomb." The thought cut through him like a blade. He sank to his knees beside the entrance, his heart heavy with both grief and awe. He had been the first to walk out of darkness, but Theon, who raised him, was about to walk into it. 3 days passed that felt like years. The village grew silent, wrapped in mourning. The air itself seemed heavy, as though creation held its breath. No laughter, no music, no life, only the dull ache of loss and disbelief. But on the third morning, when the first rays of dawn crept over the hills, a shout broke the stillness. Women came running from the road, breathless, trembling with joy and fear. "He is risen." The words struck Lazarus like thunder through his chest. For a moment he could not move. The world around him seemed to spin, light bursting through the clouds like an unseen hand, tearing the veil of heaven. Mary clutched her brother's arm, sobbing and laughing all at once. They saw him alive. The tomb was empty. Lazarus lifted his face to the sky, eyes shining with tears. "He called me from death once," he said. "Now he has called himself." He understood then the miracle of Bethany had not been an ending, but a beginning. It had been a whisper of what was to come, a promise that death itself could not hold the Son of God. The echo that had begun with his own name, Lazarus, come out, had now become a roar across eternity. He is risen. In the weeks that followed, the fear that once gripped him melted into peace. He still lived under threat. The priests still spoke his name in whispers. The soldiers still watched from afar, but it no longer mattered. He had seen too much to be afraid. Sometimes he would walk at dusk through the olive fields, the golden light bathing the hills. He would stop, close his eyes, and breathe, feeling life itself as a sacred gift. Every heartbeat a miracle borrowed from eternity. People continued to come, asking questions, seeking comfort. To each he would say the same: I once believed that life ended at the grave. Now I know the grave is only a door, and behind that door the voice of love still calls. The echo between life and death had become the song of his existence, a melody he would carry until his final breath. After the resurrection of Christ, the world seemed both the same and utterly changed. The hills of Judea still glowed under the sun. The markets still hummed with trade and chatter. Yet for those who had seen the risen Lord, nothing was ordinary anymore. Every sunrise felt like a promise reborn. For Lazarus, those days carried a strange, quiet joy and an unshakable gravity. He moved through Bethany as he always had, greeting neighbors, helping with daily work, tending to the olive grove behind the house. But every breath, every step, every glance toward the sky carried new meaning. People still came to see him, some out of devotion, others out of disbelief. Many wanted him to describe what death felt like, what he saw beyond. But Lazarus rarely spoke of it. He would smile softly and say some things cannot be spoken, only lived. When pressed, he would add, death was silence. But in that silence, I heard his voice. And once you've heard that voice, you know that no darkness can ever be final. Those who heard him would fall silent, struck by the calm certainty in his tone. It wasn't the zeal of a preacher. It was the peace of a man who had already crossed the line everyone fears and come back with faith instead of fear. In the evenings, he often sat outside the house, watching the sunset stretch across the hills. Mary would join him with her spindle, and Martha would bring bread and figs. Sometimes they would speak of the Master, recalling his laughter, his words, the warmth that filled their home whenever he entered. Mary would whisper, "Do you remember when he told us that death would not have the last word?" Lazarus would nod slowly. He proved it, first with me, then with himself. Martha would smile faintly, her hands still busy with the bread. Then why does my heart still ache when I think of him? Because love always aches, Lazarus said quietly. But now we know that even sorrow is not wasted. It is the soil from which hope grows. The sisters would fall silent, the crackle of the oil lamp filling the air. The warmth of faith surrounded them, a faith born not from theory, but from encounter. As the years passed, the house of Bethany became a place of pilgrimage. Travelers would arrive with dust on their feet and questions in their eyes. They came from Jerusalem, from Galilee, even from distant lands where the story of Jesus had already taken root. They came not for spectacle, but for reassurance, to see with their own eyes the man who had once been dead and now lived. Some would ask, "Lazarus, what was it like to hear your name called from beyond the grave?" He would close his eyes for a moment, as though listening again. Then he would answer, "It was not only my name that he called, it was all of us. Every heart lost in despair, every soul bound by fear. When he said, "Lazarus, come out," he was calling life back into the world. Others would ask, "Why do you think he chose you?" Lazarus would smile, humility softening his features. "Perhaps because I was ordinary, because through an ordinary man, the glory of God could be seen most clearly." He wanted the world to know that no one is too small for his love. Each word carried weight, but never pride. Lazarus spoke not as a man elevated above others, but as one who had been broken and restored. Yet not all who came were moved by faith. There were still those who came with suspicion, spies of the temple, men of power who feared what his story stirred in the hearts of the people. They would ask questions cloaked in courtesy. "Are you certain it was death? Could it not have been a deep sleep mistaken by those who mourned you?" Lazarus would meet their eyes without anger. "I was sealed in a tomb for 4 days. Even hope had turned cold. But when he spoke, I rose. If that is sleep, then may all the world awaken as I did." They would leave, their faces tight with unease. They could not argue with what stood before them, living, breathing proof that death had met its match. Still, Lazarus bore the weight of that truth quietly. He knew that some miracles drew danger as much as devotion. But he had made peace with that long ago dot in time. The followers of Jesus began to scatter, carrying his message to the far corners of the earth. Some went north to Syria, others west toward Rome. Each departure filled the air with both sorrow and hope. One morning, a young disciple came to Bethany, his cloak dusty from travel. "Brother Lazarus," he said, bowing respectfully, "we go to proclaim the resurrection of the Lord in other lands. Will you come with us?" Lazarus looked toward the horizon, the fields shimmering in the sun. "No," he said gently. "My task is here. The Lord gave me back this life. I will live it where he gave it." The disciple hesitated. "But you could strengthen the faith of many with your story." Lazarus smiled. "My story is not mine alone. It is already his. Go and tell it as you must. I will keep the fire burning here." And so he stayed, tending the olive trees, welcoming strangers, sharing bread with those who came to listen. Bethany became not only his home, but a sanctuary of remembrance. As the years folded into decades, his hair turned silver and the lines on his face deepened. Yet his eyes remained bright, filled with the same quiet certainty that had guided him since the day he heard his name in the dark. Sometimes he would walk to the old tomb, now overgrown with ivy and wildflowers. He would stand at its entrance, the air cool and still, and whisper a prayer of gratitude. "Once I lay here without breath, without hope, but you called me, and ever since, every breath I take belongs to you." He would trace the stone with his hand, remembering that moment when light pierced darkness, when death itself trembled at the sound of divine command. In those moments, he understood that resurrection was not a single event. It was a way of living, to rise each day with faith stronger than fear, to walk through shadows knowing light will follow in his final years. People noticed that Lazarus grew quieter. He spoke less, prayed more, and seemed to listen for something beyond the world around him. Mary would sometimes find him sitting beneath the olive trees, his face turned toward the sky, a faint smile on his lips. "What do you hear, brother?" she once asked. He answered softly, "The same voice that called me once before. I think he will call again soon." There was no fear in his tone, only peace, deep and unbroken. When that day finally came, it came gently. He awoke before dawn, the world still wrapped in twilight. Martha found him seated by the window, looking east. "The light is coming," he said quietly, and as the first rays of morning touched the hills of Bethany, Lazarus closed his eyes. His breath slowed, his hands rested peacefully in his lap. There was no struggle, no fear, only stillness. Those who were with him said it seemed less like dying and more like returning home. Mary wept softly, but her tears carried no despair. "He has only gone to the one who called him twice," she said, and in that house where life had once returned from death. There was again a strange peace, the kind that only faith can bring. Years later, travelers who passed through Bethany would speak of Lazarus, not just as the man who rose from the grave, but as one who taught the world how to live after. His story became more than a miracle. It became a mirror, showing that each heart can rise from its own tomb of doubt, pain, or loss. The echo of his life whispered through generations. Death is not the end. Faith does not fade. And when love calls your name, not even the grave can keep you.